Hi, Aaron.
Hi, Mark. How you doing today?
I'm doing okay.
I don't know if I'm showing the right screen here. There we go.
Looks like it's going to be a quiet meeting.
Yeah, maybe. I think people are just on late. Maybe 2 weeks of data and analytics was too much. Or two meetings, I mean. Hi, Lauren. Hi, Tunzi.
Hi, Erin.
How you doing?
Good. How are you today?
Very good. Thanks. As usual, we'll wait about 4 more minutes. I thought we'd have more of a group this time, but maybe not.
People are busy looking out at the snow.
Yeah. Trying to stay warm. But yeah, we'll usually get started around 12:35. So yeah, stay tuned. Hey, folks, for those of you who just joined, we usually get started about 12:35, giving folks time to transition from other meetings, grab a bite to eat, whatever they need to do. Okay, it's 12:35. And I'm looking at the participant list, and most of us are here to to hear the discussion more than probably participate. But maybe we'll get some additional folks in as we move along. Today's meeting is data analytics and reporting 2. This is the second meeting to dive into what kind of analytics visualizations are used for learning, teaching, research. And this time we're even going to, or I plan to talk more about Data Shop and LearnSphere, and to find out who makes use of those tools and what do you like to do with them. But even with this group, we might be able to discuss use cases that we've experienced, or we've had to work with others to do, and maybe what are some of those processes, needs, research questions that we've had to work with. So to drive the discussion today, it was going to be kind of some of the ways in which you've used tools in the past, and we put out some analytics and tools within Data Shop and LearnSphere that are used, and wanted to talk through those kind of one by one. So any questions, ideas, anything like that before we get started, or suggestions even? And I'm going to turn on also transcripts. And then I'm also going to give me a second here, because I started subtitles, but I don't want to see them. So I'm trying to figure out how I turn them off. Oops, that's not what I wanted to do. The transcripts are overriding my my controls. Give me a second here. This is something new I'm not used to using. I can move them. Sorry, folks, I'm just trying to, there we go. Okay. So any suggestions, anything to get the discussion started? Maybe talk about, does anybody have any experiences with not only using or trying to use Data Shop and LearnSphere, but maybe working with folks who needed to use these these tools to do some deeper analysis. And what were those? What were people trying to accomplish with them? Anyone feel like starting? So we can talk a little bit about models at first, because Norm and I have talked a lot about what we think we want to be able to enable in the new platform. And one of the ideas he has is that we should be able to explore and use different types of models. So right now, as you may know, OLI has learning objectives and even sub-objectives or knowledge components, whatever you want to call them. We call them skills in the past. In Torus, they're right now called sub-objectives, I believe. If they're called anything, I think they're just more learning objectives. But I've been told that there might be some other models, like maybe someone wants to explore topic models instead of really modeling out learning objectives and skills, maybe connecting questions to just topics. And what would that lose or provide? But that's just really an example of maybe other types of models we want to help others or enable others to be able to explore. Anybody have an opinion on that, or have ideas for maybe other knowledge models that could be used?
I know that the way that we're traditionally using the data set is we're not really concerned with learning curves. You need a certain number of questions. You need a high enough N to really like build those learning curves. And when you have the kind of package that we do, which is just a few core questions that you ask students, with sort of the embedded questions and then the quiz questions, there's not really a good way to build learning curves. So rather, we're more concerned with tracking, performance for the checkpoint quizzes. So we're interested in like the checkpoint quiz performance, and then we also match that up with the survey outcomes. So we look at correlations between what people have included for their surveys, and we also do before and after surveys. And then, as you know, we also look at how that correlates with course performance, because we have that additional data set. So I don't think I'm going to be able to add anything really about the learning curves or the additional modeling components, because I think we're using the data shop data in kind of a different way.
So you do use data shop data, but you're doing it as a comparison of particular places or assets that students interact with. So you're not generating learning curves, but are you saying that you do use data shop, but just for this specific use case, or you get the data, like the data shop export, but you don't use data shop, you just look at that data in different ways?
So Catherine is the one that really does the data shop export, and she'd be able to answer that in some more depth, and so would Victor. So after this meeting, I can reach out to them and ask what their particular data shop uses are beyond the export. But I know that we get the export, and we basically use that to track performance throughout the course, and then to correlate that with the actual like Canvas courses that students are using this as a sidecar for.
Great. Yeah, I'm pleased to do explore that. And I'm sure we'll talk to Catherine and Victor a little bit more in depth too about you guys' specific needs eventually when we're ready to start migrating stuff. But I'm curious about the model. So I assume you write true learning objectives,
Oh,
or
yes. Yes, we do.
is there anything that you found cumbersome about the type of learning objectives? Because you guys have kind of, I imagine you have like standard learning objectives like would be in any course because it is study skills. But do you also have to kind of make up objectives or objective like things to tag more of the survey stuff too?
Yeah, that's a good question. Both are true.
Okay.
So basically, we have a standard set of 3 objectives that are tailored to each of our study strategies. So there's like the same 3 that are for each study strategy, and we use those learning objectives to tag each of the individual questions that are on the quizzes. And each of those quiz questions corresponds to one of the sort of formative learn by doing activities.
Mhm.
So we make sure that our learning objectives have a 1-to-1 matchup between the in course formative piece and then the summative piece at the end. But then yes, I actually personally have found the fact that you have to have a learning objective correspondence to be somewhat cumbersome, because there are types of questions that you can ask that might not really fit into those learning objectives. And that's true of these sort of reflective questions that we have at the end of the modules. So the reflective questions have to do with student experience, and those really shouldn't be matched up to course learning objectives. And I've had to create what I call phantom learning objectives that are learning objectives only in the system that students never see. So yes, that I can say that that is cumbersome to have to create those phantom learning objectives that students are not aware of, but I need them, otherwise the system will say you don't have a learning objective matched to these questions. So if there could be a way to not have to add learning objectives for particular questions, that would be particularly beneficial. Potentially, if you were to say you could say like no learning objective, like if there's a no learning objective option, then that would be nice. Like a drop down menu. I don't know. I don't really know how you envision having that in Torus, but
Right.
they're not real learning objectives. They're simply placeholders that we have to write that are unique.
Right. And it's so that you can attach that data to something, right?
Yes, because it needs to be attached to something. And that sort of reflective question, those are invaluable to us because they allow us to make iterative improvements based upon student observations and experiences. But you can tell that those are not learning objectives. Those are just placeholders.
How do you keep those hidden from, oh, you just don't put them at the top of the page?
I don't put them at the top of the page. So students see the 3 learning objectives for each module that are the learning objectives that are at the heart of the module and that we want students to see. But I call them phantom learning objectives because the students never are asked to look at them. They're
Right.
behind the scenes.
Right. And that's interesting because the way Torus works right now, and I think it's just a stopgap. Like, I don't think this is how it's going to be going forward, but like these kinds of discussions will shape exactly what's needed going forward. Right now, learning objectives show at the top of the page, not explicitly because we put them there, but are rolled up from the tags of the activities in that page. So
I would not
right.
for that.
Exactly.
Yes, because then I will have to specially word my
Yeah.
phantom learning objectives to be like, okay, reflection learning objective. And students are going to be like, what is this?
Right.
Yeah.
So think about that though. Let's poke on that for a second though. What kind of that lends itself to a different kind of model, right? And what is that model? It's not necessarily a learning model. It's more of a
Feedback. It's a feedback piece. Feedback for us. It's feedback for the people that.
Oh, yeah.
And that's because we do this iterative improvement.
Right.
Pretty actively.
But I mean, there's something there that you might like. So I was thinking more along the lines of like socio-emotional type indicators.
Oh, yes, there's two different types that we gather.
Mhm.
Yeah, so the types of
That's okay.
reflective questionings that we ask, some of those are intended for students to do their own reflections. And there are a lot of those that we have students do their own reflections and articulate for themselves how they're currently using study strategies. And those are embedded at the end of every module. And then we also have some that are targeted at gathering feedback about kind of how students feel about the platform itself, sort of
Yeah,
thing.
and
Very
the
cool.
learning experience and the
Yeah.
content kind of thing. Yeah. So yeah, it sounds like for those, so even if we allowed you to attach, to create questions that weren't attached to learning objectives, it sounds like about half of those, or actually more than half, more like 3/4 of those, where they're gathering feedback, could actually be tagged to some objective in terms of, like you just said it here, articulating for yourselves how to use the study strategies. That's like a good one. But I can imagine other not as explicit objectives that you'd want to gather data about, but not necessarily at the students will be able to kind of state, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, so those, I mean, some of those are not even learning objectives. So I feel like maybe there's a different category than learning objectives, but I don't know what the right term for that would be.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a delivery objective. Well, at least the thing about gathering information for iterative improvement is definitely a delivery objective.
Mhm.
But then there's also, it's more like a reflection objective for us. But again, that could be very niche for our group because we're doing metacognitive coursework.
Right, but if we want to encourage more of that type of thing, which I think we do, we need to make a space for enabling even that kind of, the different kind of data collection in a way. I like this idea of delivery objectives mainly because one of the things that I would like for both authors in the system and instructors to provide, or I don't know what the word is, to capture, is what are some of the assumptions they're making through their iterative improvement efforts or customizations, and what are these kind of, I like this idea of delivery objectives. Like, what do they want to accomplish by putting this material together in the way that they have, right? And I want to be able to collect, I've been calling it like metadata, like what's the metadata around why is an instructor using this particular content in this way? Are there certain experimental things that they're doing that we just need to like get their thinking about, so that when they get the data on the other side, they can actually prove or disprove whatever hypotheses they had going into the delivery of that content, not just the content itself. So I kind of like this idea. It resonates with me.
Great. And then there was a suggestion in the chat that
what
I'm describing is metacognitive learning objective potentially as a separate category.
Yeah. So it's almost like we're offering the ability in our assessments now to have those curriculum banks where you can use tags on those questions. We almost kind of want maybe a similar tagging on learning objectives to be able to maybe for ourselves in the back end, not making it visible to students, but so that we know, oh, this group of learning objectives is for this particular, serving a certain purpose. And this, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, one other thing that we can conceptualize is it's not really, you could even have there be a type of question that's not like a learn by doing question with short answer response. You could actually have a different label called just like reflective questions or reflective response, maybe that would also cue people that are building courses to think about trying to embed these reflective response questions as a natural part of their courses, not just to include content questions, because having students do sort of elaboration on their thought processes can be really helpful.
Well, and we want to encourage more of that because we know it's, you know, it's a proven method that helps students learn better going forward, right? So it's something we talk about and we try to encourage, but you're right. If we had a particular label or question type that is just like reflective response, it might prompt developers and instructors to say, oh, well, I obviously should populate my course with some of these too.
That'd be great, because now we do learn by doings, but it's not really a learn by doing. It is a reflective response.
Yeah. That's good to know. Yeah, I wish, you know, what's funny about that is that's actually a lot of the stuff I'm trying to get at in these meetings. How are people using the system and what we make available in ways that we don't even know, right? And as a developer of these types of courses, I've done it a million times. Like when I had access to the XML, I could use those XML tags in various ways just to make my, like, okay, this isn't quite an example, but I'm going to use that example tag and to make it look a certain way and fit on the page with the other material a certain way, you know, things like that, where we're using the semantic labels available in the system really for styling and for styling purposes. So
Thanks, Erin. I feel like we always get to like different points. Like you have really helpful kind of guiding questions, because I definitely don't think we would have gotten to this discussion without your help. And I didn't even think about the fact that we were using this in a non-traditional way. I was just like, oh yeah, we use those learn by doings. And I was like, oh, but they're not really learn by doings. You don't even really think about the workarounds that you're using until someone articulates it.
I know. In fact, you know, I'm glad you said that, because I'm always asking for what are people's workarounds. And I don't think you're exactly right. I'm not thinking actively, oh, here's the list of workarounds I use. It's more like, what else do you use the learn by doing label to do? You know, like I think I have to get better in my questioning when I'm asking about workarounds, like to be more specific. Learn about doing. I like that, Gideon.
The other thing that we've kind of struggled with in the past, Erin, is this really like hard discrimination between activities that are summative and formative, and you have to either fit in one box or the other. I feel like that is increasingly becoming kind of a gray area. And I know that that's something that is very important. It's an important distinguishing characteristic for Echo as it currently is.
Mm-hmm.
And that might be an important conversation for people to have. Like, what are your needs? Are you wanting it to be a strict formative or summative, or are there things that are kind of both?
Yeah, I'm going to capture that. Trying to get a new note slide here.
The other piece about that that's important to me is that I notice that there are students that don't work their way through our cognition toolbox and instead just go and do all the quizzes, because the quizzes are listed in the gradebook as these checkpoints. And then students aren't doing the learn by doings because they're considered formative, so they don't show up in the gradebook. I would love everything to show up in the gradebook, so that students would actually be like, oh, I have to do all of these things, as opposed to just seeing the surveys. We know that one of the things that's happening with LMS platforms, at least I've noticed this change in our LMS, is that students are no longer reading through modular content. They're simply going by the activity due dates, and then they go to those activities. And people are trying to come up with workaround fixes for that in Canvas right now. I have an
Mm.
instructor that basically is forcing her students to only be able to view page by page. So her modules of her courses are really, really long. And then students are becoming kind of intimidated by that. Yes, gating is becoming very important. So being mindful of this, it's not super great for me that the grade book only shows these checkpoint quizzes and these surveys. I want the grade book to show that there's these formative activities that students should be doing throughout the course. I would also love it if students couldn't proceed from one page to the next without going through the previous page. And that's something we talked about before. We don't really, I know we don't like to force students the way they ingest the content, but like seriously, if they could only progress one page at a time, they wouldn't be able to skip those things. So maybe that's its own whole discussion.
Yeah, it
Okay.
is. Go ahead.
Yeah, Gideon here. You mentioned formative and summative, but I think you were referring to whether or not the percentage shows in the book,
Yes.
right? But what's their grade from, right? I would call the grade the evaluation. So sometimes that's just training the students. Or if you're looking at their percentage score on the checkpoints as what you are actually grading, then you have to weigh what you are motivating the students to do.
Mhm.
I come from a weird perspective because WGU uses a course like this,
Mhm.
but we have our own sort of external stats test. So everything anybody ever does for anything is merely summative. Merely formative.
Right.
So you got to really weigh what you're motivating. And yes, Aaron, it would be awesome if we could tell the grade book what shows in percentages, right? Whether it's formative or summative, give us the ability to turn off or turn on percentages for the students to see. My
Yes.
perspective is a little bit contradictory to yours, Lauren, in that I would never gate progress through the course because maybe they know a bunch of stuff already, but I might gateway something that's going to count for their grade. So I might have an external quiz, or maybe even, Aaron, a quiz inside this textbook that they'd have to gateway by. You got to get an 80% 3 times in a row on the checkpoints, which are, infinitely regenerating, algorithmically generated kind of things. You got to get an 80% 3 times in a row before I let you take this quiz, which is for a grade,
Mhm.
right? Or you got to get an 80% once on a summative, quote, summative assessment for the whole course before I let you take the proctored exam, right?
Mhm.
We're all online, but of course that could be the same thing face to face.
Mhm.
You got to prove yourself on the fully formative textbook here before you can take the summative, which in my language would be the evaluation, right? It's certainly a way to communicate with your students what counts, which might be nothing counts in this book. It's
Right.
only your training. So if you want to skip stuff, you're shooting yourself in the foot, or you know that you already know it.
Yeah.
Does that make
Well,
any sense?
Yes. What I was just going to explain to Lauren, because what Lauren's beholden to is they develop materials that are then a lot of the data that they're getting is generated on other instructors using these materials. So it really matters how those instructors are particularly using the course materials and what instructions they're giving and what they're grading versus not. So Lauren, you're really beholden to that, but what would be nice is if you at least knew that context and what practices in the classroom, so to speak, are motivating or demotivating the students to complete certain work. You know what I mean? So for example, one of the use cases we say people use a lot, which I think still is the case, is instructors assigning gating the assessment, the summative assessment at the end of a module, but making sure students do the practice before they open up the exam, for example. So they're really assigning that practice as homework. There might be instructors though that don't do that and are just kind of encouraging, by not even meaning to, the behavior for students to just go to the assessment and see what kind of grade they get first before they do the practice. It really matters, but the point I want to capture here is, wouldn't it be nice to know more about that context, especially for someone like you, Lauren, who's looking at the data kind of removed from the context, you know?
And one thing this always reminds me of is that over my 17 years doing online instruction, I've seen students sort of evolve into wanting smaller bites of knowledge and deeper interactive evaluation of it, right? So even though your materials are written in a way that can be read, sometimes it goes on for 4, 5, 6, 7 pages before there is a checkpoint, right? I think the modern sensibilities would be more like half a page or a page and a half before there is a much smaller checkpoint on a smaller group of materials, maybe with a percentage grade, or you put that under our control. And then you can also have markers where you wrap up 4, 5, 6 of these mini checkpoints into a major checkpoint where they're checking a whole competency or whatever your language is, whole topic. And then even more major ones that feel more like unit exams, and then maybe a final one, right? So it's this never-ending cyclical nature of the learning that I'm starting to see students want more of that. And until you break apart the checkpoints into the books more granularly, they're still probably going to be like, ugh, 8 pages of reading.
Yeah.
Let me just go to the checkpoints and try, and then read backwards to fill in the gaps, which is painful and inefficient.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Is if we delivered more checkpoints more often in smaller chunks, that might automatically motivate the students to get through the material and even the formative assessments, because it's a more digestible practice session, and then moving on to the checkpoints. That's interesting. Actually, as you talk, Gideon, I just keep thinking we have to develop a course with you for your particular use case, because I think it'd be beneficial to a lot of folks. And it'd be interesting to see what kind of things we do to fit your particular audience, which like, again, I think would serve others well as well.
For those who don't know, we do structured independent studies. So we have the WGU assessment, and we provide them the learning resources to use in any way or not at all. We have some grad students who come in knowing stuff, so they just take the final exam and pass. Others know nothing, and they go through every line of our learning resources. But most of them try to skip a lot because adults are busy. Everyone's busy. And they go straight for the assessment. And that's okay if the learning cycle is small. That's okay if they know it's only formative. You know, it's sort of the way you structure yourself. We do the big grade at the end, learn however you can.
Right.
It's not about your sort of daily, weekly engagement. It's about your knowledge at the end. And I know that doesn't translate to most places that have scheduled meetings. But if you've got online courses, it's kind of what you're doing anyway. So it's pretty adaptable model.
Yeah, I mean, WGU is kind of, you still hold synchronous sessions occasionally, and invite students to those if necessary. I mean, students really are in charge of their own learning, meaning they could even they could use a completely different set of learning resources as long as they still supported them in passing that final assessment.
Absolutely.
Right.
Pearson textbooks are not very readable, but the diagnostics in them are awesome. So we even point them to outside resources for initial video learning, and then the reading is just optional and after the fact. But the diagnostics within the textbooks, the Pearson textbooks, are really powerful for calculus, for example. And I think that kind of competency-based approach has a lot of merit for, like, even modern young college students, as opposed, it's perfect for busy working adults, but even young modern students, they seem to be much more small bites. Just get me down to what's practical. I'll prove myself.
Right.
Okay, great.
Yeah, the model's interesting. I think, like you said, I think there's some things we could do for them, for those types of students that would be still resonate beyond that. So yeah, so I took some notes here about, capturing that context when delivering a course, which is actually in alignment with some of our, our research has shown, particularly Lauren Herkus's research has shown that, instructors need support in just adopting materials, and most of the time, the most success that they have is when they have a colleague that's not just said, yeah, use what I use, but also said, oh, here's a sample lesson plan. Here's what I do in the classroom after students have done the practice online. And here's some ideas for how to implement. Here's some policies like grading policies and things to use with the materials. We found that, or Lauren found that those types of supports lend themselves to most to successful use of new types of online learning content. And so I think because of that, it would be nice to even just have like a short place in any given course where we kind of just ask, what are some of these policies you use? What are some other techniques or activities that you perform in the classroom in alignment or in conjunction, in parallel with this type of course material? I think if we start capturing that, we'll get a lot more ideas about how to structure and what kind of controls to give instructors that will help them in their delivery, and maybe even serve that data back to people like Lauren, but also Lauren Herkus, but also you, Lauren. And would it be nice to have that kind of contextual information with the data that you receive, or is that too much?
So, basically what we're delivering at this point in time has to be completely contained within just the online delivery mode. Because also, we don't have really control, and it doesn't really, whatever context is happening, it's great when instructors are encouraging students to work their way through the toolbox and to use practice questions. But we also have, very little control over what is happening in terms of the larger course context, in terms of how instructors are telling students to work through this content. We try to be as contained as we can in terms of having all of the instructions within our course itself. My observation was merely that I know that students are changing how they work through our learning management system and only looking at kind of the grade book, and this is what's due at this time point. So I would like to have the opportunity in the grade book that students look at to have students see not only this is a checkpoint quiz, but these are practice activities. I just would love it if the practice activities could show up in the grade book so that students are aware of the fact that there are embedded learn by doing activities that they should be focusing on, and that they shouldn't just click on the checkpoint quiz to do. I think it trains students to look for those learning activities that are practice and not just look for the final quiz, because that sort of behavior doesn't really serve students. So if we have the option in the grade book to say like practice activity, I don't care about percentage. In fact, I don't even care if the students see their percentage correct for the checkpoint quiz. I know that that's something that's embedded. But if they even just got a check mark for completing the practice activity, that would be hugely helpful so that they can see that there are practice activities that they are missing if they don't go into the module. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. So you just want to be able to change the behavior of the students regardless of what instructions or what the instructors are doing with the thing. What I was suggesting is that, at least you would maybe know how they're doing it, and then if we capture some of that information. But I see what you're saying too. Yeah, if we make it's kind of a little bit of a gaming, right? Putting a leaderboard out there, putting something that like makes them want to attain that goal, right?
Yes.
So it sounds like in terms of data and analytics, what I'm hearing is that even if all of the data and analytics, we could do all the live long day on these formative practice activities. If we don't have the data to begin with, because students aren't doing them, then all of that's for naught, right?
That's precisely, you've just nailed it. So Erin, we have some students that do the whole toolbox. They're going through each page. They're doing the practice activities. They're doing the surveys. They're doing the checkpoint quizzes. And then there is a there's a substantial group of students that are simply going to the gradebook and doing the checkpoint quizzes, which is not what we intend for them to do.
Right.
So if we cue them into the fact that that's not what they're supposed to do by having the practice activities listed in the gradebook, that's a hint to students that there's more to do than simply completing a checkpoint quiz.
Yeah.
And if a little bit more gating is in control, like our control, that would help us. Like if students couldn't proceed page by page until they did a previous page, that would help us. But I also understand that that control doesn't always exist.
Yeah, and I'll have to look into it. They just recently, actually, I think for January 1st, added gating. There's different types of gating that they've added to Torus, and I'd have to look into what those are and see. But there's definitely, I think, more robust gating features built into Torus than there was in Legacy. But that's another future topic as well, is gating in general and how that works, and maybe there's ideas for how else it might be done. So great. I'm going to go back to this slide to see if there's anything else I can dig into. So we've talked a little about models, types of data we'd like to collect, I guess, or differently from how we currently do it. I don't hear anyone on here or see anyone on here that probably has done a lot in terms of learning curves. So performance profiler, I think what this is, and Tanvi, you can keep me honest here, but I believe what that's referring to, it's a ability in data shop to be able to see the performance on specific questions. Is that correct, Tanvi? Cindy?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so I want to just, for those of you who don't know, so question specific data and analytics.
Yeah, like they can view the top 10 performing questions within the course, or the bottom 10 performing questions in the course based on student performance. And then also, I think you can aggregate the data based on either problems, steps, knowledge components, etc. And yeah, I think that data, you can even try to see the predicted error rate or the actual error rate based on the data that is available.
And how, sorry, Tanvi, to put you on the spot, but how is that different from just the error reports go into specific questions and the distribution of answers on a specific question? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. This one gives just an overview of like the ones in which students are not performing well, the ones in which students are performing well, like kind of like more of a pictorial overview, graphical overview.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So for those, so Gideon, Lauren, are those types of analyses, I know you probably use some of this, maybe not in data shop, but you're analyzing it in some way for iterative improvement, right? This is, we're not talking like real-time analytics now, we're talking like after the fact analysis. So how valuable are these types of analyses to each of you?
Well, we did an analysis at one point where we looked at which questions students were getting wrong, like predominantly, and there was like a cutoff that Victor used for what I think it was like at least 75% or something like that. And then we looked at which distractor they were choosing.
Mhm.
So basically, we have used analyses to basically rewrite questions that students were getting wrong, like a strange percentage of getting wrong. So we absolutely have looked at the data for individual question performance. And it really helped us to change our questions.
And I know you mentioned you're not really the one that uses data shop, but does Victor and Catherine use data shop for that type of stuff, or are they doing these analyses just with the raw data in some other way? Do you know?
I'm sure that they use the data that was exported from data shop to look at the checkpoint. This was the checkpoint quiz questions. So I'm sure they used that exported data set and just looked at what students chose for particular questions, for questions that were mostly wrong.
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how active they might be in data shop itself.
Yeah, I have no idea. I will ask Kathy and Victor. They also, when we came to CMU to do the actual, like the CMU week-long workshop, I did the course creation one and Kathy did the data shop one. So I didn't do the data shop one. I have like no formal training. So I will ask her and Victor if they're using the kind of interactive components.
Yeah, and just let me know at a high level if they're like, it's great, we use it all the time, it's very helpful, or if they're like, we're kind of using it, but in these specific ways, or you know what, we just take the data and look at it on our own. I'm kind of trying to get that kind of, thumbs up, thumbs down, kind of iffy on it. Idea of I'm trying to figure out how many instructors, and I would actually consider Victor and Catherine researchers more than instructors, but trying to get a sense of how many instructors have tried using these other tools and what their experiences are. And thanks, Gideon. Yeah, our analysis, or WGU does something similar, but on the final competency exams, and they really, they have a whole psychometric department that really hones in on those tests for sure. But also, what parts of the resource are helpful or not, where things might not be aligned. Those are all good things.
And in answer to your question, Cindy, I think primarily, the exported data, we then merge with data sets that I'm creating from data outputs from our learning management system on individual course performance. And then this is being integrated and merged into SPSS. So pretty much all of our analyses, I think, are being done in SPSS. I don't know if that answers your question, Cindy.
Technical issues here. So you're using a combination of, so I've used question level data for individual, acted on it to improve questions. And then I also wanted to note that, I wanted to note something from what Gideon said too about data used to evaluate, both exam health, but also course health. I think that's kind of a given, but I like to capture, even the assumptions we make with this stuff. Course health, content, specific content. Okay. Let's see, let me go back to. Yeah, we have this also analysis workflow in LearnSphere that allows us to, or allows anybody to upload a grade book. And basically it's going to analyze for you what activities, what formative activities contribute most to better performance on summative. So you can kind of, and anyone on here that knows better than me can correct me, but I believe it's more of like, okay, here's of all these things that you grade on, these particular activities seem to be contributing to the best performance on final exam, so to speak. Which is, I think, something that would be really helpful for just everyday teachers, but I don't think it's widely known that this exists. And I don't know how widely these types of analyses are performed by everyday teachers, instructors, and educators. So that, you know, to Cindy's point, it would be nice to hear more about who's using what tools and how, essentially. So, you know, for those other folks that you all might talk to, please, we're always interested in collecting that kind of data, or even just use cases. If someone could just want to describe to me verbally, I'll set up a meeting with anyone to just whoever wants to just tell me, here's how we use it, and it'd be nice if it did this too, or something, you know. Always looking for that kind of feedback. So I'm gonna skip to what are some analyses, and I think we've covered some of this in the past meeting, but it doesn't hurt to reiterate and with some additional folks that you would like to be able to perform that you can't. So again, getting Lauren to some of your ideas of workarounds, like what are some things that you might have to do with the data to make more inferences about things, rather than like, wow, if we just had this one other thing, we'd be able to really make some clear statements about what's going on.
Okay, so for me, I think one of the the biggest obstacles to being able to have more data is simply, as I said, this sort of like a la carte use of the toolbox. Like this student just went in and I can see that they did 30 seconds on this checkpoint quiz. And then they went in and did this other checkpoint quiz, and then they didn't like work their way through the toolbox. So I would say that that's like the largest barrier to having like a larger N for us. So we can see that basically we can see those students based upon the amount of time that we see their check-in and check-out time on the different components. But really what would be more, I mean, it would be helpful if there was an analytic that was basically an overall, like if there could be an overall metric of this is completion of the course beyond simply, well, they did the checkpoint quizzes, right? So like we kind of have to go in and look on a case by case basis. Oh, like this student has a check-in, check-out time of this quiz and this quiz, so we suspect that they didn't do anything. Like, wouldn't it be helpful for us, I think, to know, okay, the students spent an hour in the course. Great. We want to include that student in our data set. They actually read through the course. Like, I feel like we would otherwise have to parse through on an individual by individual basis whether or not an individual is even doing the course versus just going in and taking quizzes. So that would be really helpful. This sort of a completion metric. Did they look at all the pages in the course? Did they actually click through the entire course?
Yeah, I mean, we have that now in we have that in the grade book, but it's not precise, right? It's a visual bar that, you know, you could probably interpret a couple different ways. But But you had a couple things in that description, being able to spot trends better around a number of things. Course completion, of course, is your big. We need to see that. It's really something that comes up, I think, daily. I'll say, being able to see better completion, better participation metrics, and be able to line up timestamps better. I think that's the best way I could put it. Like, have some sort of visual that actually shows you participation and get that data in some specific way. And then decisions about what data to include or not, being able to peel off outliers from the data. Sounds like it's something that would be cool.
Absolutely. So like, for example, if there's 70 pages in our course, which one of our courses, happen to be 70 pages.
Mhm.
Even if there was a column to say like, a student clicked through 60 out of 70 of those pages, that would be enough for us to keep or eliminate a student. So just percentage of pages that were viewed. So did a student view at least 70% of the pages? Like, we can have the cutoff, but column to show the number of pages viewed. Because like, we don't need to look at all the click-through data for like a student clicked here on the page and here on the page. We want to be able to make decisions about including or excluding a student based upon whether or not they even completed the course. Not in terms of did they do all the checkpoints, but did they click through all the pages? That would be, I think, pretty valuable to us.
Cool.
That's a proxy of completion, I think.
It is, but I mean, it is. But I don't think there's any way we can say what was opened. We can't say exactly what was read, right?
Nope. But that helps us eliminate students that simply clicked on the checkpoint quizzes. So if we can just quickly eliminate students that only went to the checkpoint quizzes and didn't view any content, we know they didn't view on any content because it shows that they've only viewed 7 pages out of 70, we can eliminate those students. Like, if you only clicked on the checkpoints, you viewed 10% of the course content. But if you have viewed more than 10% of the course content, then you have done more than simply go to checkpoints.
Right. Yeah, I mean, even having some of that data is better than having nothing, even if you have to make inferences from it. And I mean, that's essentially what I was asking. Like, what are some things that you kind of like, you're like, we're guessing this is the behavior based on what we're seeing, but we don't know because we don't have the data in front of us, right?
Yeah, so if they don't do any of the learn by doings, then we assume that they just did the checkpoints. That's an assumption that we're making. If you did none of the learn by doings, but you did the checkpoints, we're assuming you didn't read through the course.
Yeah, but they might have actually read through the course and just skipped the practice.
Absolutely. Yeah. So having this extra piece of, oh no, there's evidence that you actually clicked through all 70 pages, that gives us more confidence to not eliminate those students that didn't do the learn by doings.
Right.
That's where my inference comes in.
Yeah, good. Yeah, thanks for explaining that. Interesting. And what's Tanvi saying? If they visited the page but just used it for going to the next page, not even skimmed through it. I know there's not a good way to really know that they actually read it, but I guess if you know that a student visited every page and then did well on the checkpoint, I mean, I don't know. I guess I'm trying to say, like, there are inferences you can make. They may not be perfect, but when you put different data together in a way that you can make a stronger inference from than if you only had one piece or the other, right?
I mean, that is one benefit of data shop, in the sense that we're tracking student actions, right? It's not just at the level of how they did on a question or a quiz. And because we're tracking student actions, we do get did they click on this page? Do they click? And then it affords the ability to then take further analysis that says, yes, they clicked on all these pages, but we know from the very next, item in the transaction log that, it was 5 clicks in quick succession kind of thing. So
Yeah.
that is available. That's a possible, analysis that could be done because we're getting it at that selection action input level as opposed to just at the item.
So, I mean, the point is that we collect that data. We maybe just don't have a good representation or visualization for non-researchers to kind of consume it and make use of that data. It's available and we can do it in
Yeah.
DataClub. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I think that's
a good question.
I think that's a point that's commonly made about data shop is that there is, and that was the idea with this, the gray book analysis that's sort of separate from LearnSphere even was that, to bring it to the level of the instructor, because data shop is, I don't mean to be insulting, but over the head of a lot of people and not at all what a lot of people need, right?
Right.
But because there's so much data there, it could be called to make a user-friendly, add-on piece in Torus that gives this kind of information without having to bog people down with stuff they don't need or want.
Yeah. I mean, ideally, data shop's amazing and researchers make use of it like crazy. I want to be able to have some of that researcher type thinking that, your course is a hypothesis. So what are some things you should be testing? Kind of extract that out a little bit for the people who don't want to dig in and play with the data a whole lot or at that level, right? But I think it's super useful and powerful. And for anyone who hasn't used it, I would encourage even just going in and looking at what's there, because I think that even just generates ideas for you about you see what's possible and you start to think, oh, now I can put this with that. And but yeah.
And that's kind of what I was getting at with the comment about what Lauren's colleagues are doing. Because we have done and we want to continue to take things that other people are doing, say they've written a great Python script or something that we can then pull into LearnSphere and make available to other people. And even other people being Torus, right? So if someone's written a great parsing script that maybe we can pull in and then Torus won't have to reinvent the wheel, they can just pull from a LearnSphere workflow and display that. So that's why unfortunately we don't do anything with SPSS yet, but I can look into it.
But yeah, now that you mentioned that, I didn't capture that. I want to Student Coach Toolbox folks use SPSS. And I think that's a common one to use for more, I'll say, lay people who are not looking to dig into a lot of data, but need more of that summarized data. SPSS, if I remember correctly, is pretty user-friendly for folks who aren't used to looking at data all day.
I think it's really common, in like the learning sciences and
Yes.
psychology fields to use
Yes.
SPSS. Like my training was as a biological scientist and I never used SPSS. So each field has its own niche. I want to come back to something you said earlier, Erin.
Okay.
Yes, Data Shop has a tremendous amount of information. But even for people that are primarily researchers, like me and Kathy and Victor are researchers, that click data is not translated for us into something that's necessarily usable for our research. Because what we need from that click data is for it to be combined into a metric for something that's more easily utilizable. Like I was describing before, if we can just know this person clicked on every page, that has become then usable for us. But knowing when we have 6,000 students completing something in a semester, that click data on like an individual page, just like there's this many clicks on this page, that's almost like unmanageable. And this is coming from a place from someone who did big data, like I did genomic analysis. That's almost like on the level of like genomic analysis. You have too much information. You have to put it down into something that you're looking at individual genes. So how do we translate that click data into something that's meaningful, not only for researchers or instructors? I think that that is meaningful when you are able to make it a proxy for completion. This student clicked on this percentage of the pages. That then becomes completion data. That then becomes utilizable. But simply having click data that is so dense, like that's not even usable from my perspective.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for that. Because basically you're saying, I am the kind of person this was built for, and I still need something more manageable, meaningful.
And it's there because you've collected it, it's harnessable. So that's very exciting for me.
Yes.
But I don't think that we use the click data because there's so
Granular.
much of it.
It's granular, yeah. And I mean, to Sydney's point, yeah, you could put that together and know even better about what students are doing in the system. But not having a visualization, or like we need kind of almost a little portal that like allows you to summarize it or chunk it in ways that you can make draw some conclusions from, even if they are proxies for those conclusions.
And you have time point data too. I mean, you have like start and stop times for quizzes and when the quizzes happen. And if I see that a student did quiz 1, 2 seconds later did quiz 2, a minute later did quiz 3, I know that they're abusing the quiz system. But so I'm saying like there are ways to tailor this. And I mean, Kathy and Victor aren't writing R or Python scripts to do this, but if someone else has done that, I love what you said, like that's harnessable in the Learn sphere. If someone else is writing in R for compiling that time point data, that would be great. We would utilize it.
Yes, indeed. To that point, I bet there's a lot of good stuff in Learn sphere that folks don't even know about. And maybe what we need to do is like kind of comb through that and collect up those Learn sphere workflows that would be most used by others, and actually just promote those, like actually market the workflows, not just Learn sphere as a whole, but a particular workflow. I don't know, that thought just came to me. It's like trying to get more people to use what already exists in Learn sphere. If it's already been done, then we should tout it, I think, further out so that folks like Lauren do know, oh, this thing that I do by hand every day is there's a workflow in Learn sphere I could just plug into. I don't know how much of that actually exists, but I imagine that there's more than what I know. I want to capture that because that's just like my own little and market's the only word I can think of at the moment, but market or advertise. There's even another word I'm trying to think of that's not so corporate-y. Market, advertise, specific, Learn sphere workflows. What was that, Mark?
How about promote?
Promote. Thank you. Yeah, I wanted something more general.
Yeah, we have a recommended workflows tab right now, but even those tend to be the ones I have in mind. I'm not full. I can't remember the full list, but a lot of them are still at the level of a researcher. Not even the level. That's not even the right word. It's our researchers doing very specific things. So they're reusable for them, like we've got Paulo who does, runs a workflow over 5 different data sets, but it's the same workflow. So it's reusable by him, and we recommend it because it's able to, because it's linked to a paper he produced. But I think we could definitely still benefit from having some that are more at the quote everyday level.
Yeah, and I'm even because I'm trying to think of projects to suggest to middle students for an internship I'm trying to put in place starting this summer. And
Right.
this is a good, maybe this is a
Yeah, that's
good,
not a great one.
yeah. Because the students, the middle students have been really involved in using Torus even, and providing lots of good feedback on even just what they need to do in their class projects in terms of analyses, and what's been available to them and what they need. Otherwise, I did a whole focus group on that, and it produced some really valuable, excuse me, information. So yeah, I want
Yeah,
to,
that's an excellent idea.
yeah.
This is all about, really bridging the gap between people that are doing educational research and then also people that are just really good data scientists.
Yes.
And if you're not an expert data scientist that writes your own code or, is used to using different pipelines and plugging data in, where it's a lot harder to tap into, getting the most out of LearnSphere and DataShop. And the people that are really good at that, as long as you notate and you write what you can use this for, people will absolutely use that. But if you're not a data scientist, it's just going to be really hard to leverage the power of what's there.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've been trying to do. I mean, that's been my job for the last few years, being back at CMU, is trying to bridge the gap between what's in DataShop and LearnSphere and what folks need, everyday folks need out of it. And yeah, the more we can do of that, the better, for sure. It's making more, data science more accessible, right, to a larger group of people other than data scientists.
So to add to Cindy's point, I think I had just added the link to one of the LearnSphere workflows in the notes of this slide. So if you see towards the end, there is a link to the workflow in the notes. So here, let me just post it on chat.
Okay.
But that is Peter explaining one of the LearnSphere workflows that could be used for analyzing the gradebook data. And Cindy was mentioning, it generates a correlation metrics and uses Cronbach's alpha. So I'm just adding that over here for everyone to look at either right now or in their free time, to see how we are looking at different questions and trying to associate them with the summative exam performance or the final exam performance, and also looking at individual question items and analyzing how reliable they might be.
That's fantastic.
This workflow might be helpful for Lauren, you and your team, if you all are correlating, if you all are using the gradebook data and trying to analyze it in different ways.
Yeah, and the video references a particular one of what I call the recommended workflows, meaning they're public. So let me dig that link out and I'll stick that in chat as well.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. We absolutely have explicitly been mining the data through our merged SPSS files. And I did not know it could be done until our conversation today in LearnSphere. I had no idea. We just were basically combining, our LMS data after a lot of data work on my part with the exported file. And we were doing it all exclusively in SPSS. So until today's conversation, I didn't even know that there were existing workflows for us to do that merger in LearnSphere.
Yeah, LearnSphere is pretty powerful, because what it can do is it can set up, I can imagine as you're looking at the data and analyzing the data, you're actually going through different types of workflows that you need to kind of happen in a sequence, right? And so different kinds of analyses or transforming of formats that you have to set up and do even before you get to the analysis of the data. And what LearnSphere allows you to do is set those up in a repeatable way. So if you're always performing the same kind of actions on a data set, you can set it up in LearnSphere to just like basically upload the new data set and run through all of the things that you do with it. It's pretty cool and powerful. Oh, wait, I didn't mean to do that.
I'm not sure it would be as it's ready for what you're doing yet, Lauren, because it does have requirements on what the input files look like. But it gives you some idea of
Can they
what-
just be Excel files? Like, will it allow for just importing Excel files?
It takes CSV, so yeah,
Oh,
if you just
perfect.
if you get
Yep.
Excel files differently. But it is very sort of bare bones in the sense that it's a, there's a row per student and a column per item, and the item can be a question or a test, or whatever. So it won't take something from your data shop data set that you're exporting for your colleagues, but it will take, like if you did an export from Canvas of the grade book and provide that per item analysis and whatnot.
So basically, if I have, let's say I have the final grades from Gradebook, and I
Mhm.
want to look at in Learning Sphere, if there's a strong correlation between the final grades and then how people performed on a particular survey, if
Yes.
the survey has scores, it can do that for me.
Yep.
Great.
Excellent.
I have to run, but thank you all very much. And please don't hesitate to reach out either via Aaron or Data Shop Help if there's things that Data Shop team can help with.
Yeah, thanks, Cindy. Cindy's
It's always
amazing.
good. I'm
and-
sorry I don't make it to more of these. There's lots of good stuff happening.
Yeah, it's been a really good meeting. I was actually just going to wrap up, so you won't miss anything, Cindy. Thank you so much for being here.
Take care.
So yeah, I'm going to wrap up. I think we've taken a lot of good notes from this meeting, and even got ideas for subsequent topics in these meetings. So I'm just pleased, and thank you, Lauren, again for being here, being so engaged. Gideon, thank you. I always love to have multiple perspectives in at least one meeting. It's great to have different use cases and different ideas for how this could be. So thank you all from the bottom of my heart. Please continue to come, share the link or share the registration link with others, because the more the merrier always. And I'm really looking forward to this year's worth of topics and the continued development of Torus based on the feedback I'm collecting. So thank you so much and enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, Erin. These
Sure.
meetings are always helpful.
I'm glad.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, thanks.